Alrighty, so this is a couple pieces of sandwich balsa. Notice I put edging balsa around there too. I cut these all out with a little cutting compass, a little alpha cutter. And then I threaded my little screw through the center. And I'm just sticking it on my Dremel tool. And when you tighten them down, they kind of crunch and squish a little bit. But the idea, of course, is to keep the thing on tight. It looks really thick. Well, you check it and make sure it's even and square and stuff. But it looks really thick, but a lot of that is going to get sanded away, of course, and so it's pretty surprising how little remains. I start off with usually pretty heavy grit sandpaper, get off some of the stuff kind of quickly, and notice I'm rolling it around the edge to try to make a curve. Works pretty well. I take a little piece of lighter sandpaper and try to get the inside part where the hub is going to end up going. So I'm trying to get those little, the edges of the little tire on so that they look a little bit better. And it just takes a little bit of practice. Try some on the back side too, because that side is going to be seen as well. And you keep checking it with your little jig, and then you go to the finer sandpaper and roll that around. Then I'm speeding this up a little bit just because it's just more of the same, but you can still see what's happening. You just go back and forth, and you use different grit sandpaper if you like. You can even use wet dry sandpaper, and you keep checking things. If I had calipers, you could check it just once with a caliper. You wouldn't have to play around with a piece of paper, but I didn't have my calipers handy. But you just keep making sure you're going in the right shape, and you eye it down the edge, make sure you've got the right cross section, essentially. Mine are never that good. I have in my head what I want it to look like. And a lot of times it looks a little thinner or a little sharper than it needs to be or should be. But when they're all done, they look pretty good. And you can see I've done one already. I'm trying to make sure they're both the same size, because if they're not, of course, the airplane is going to look all crooked. It's going to sit down and look all kittywampus. So you want to make sure that you make it nice and even. So you keep going down and do it slow, because you can remove material, you can't add it back on. So the more times you check and practice, you can see here I'm getting close, but it's not quite ready. And just a little bit at a time is all you need. And I believe that looks pretty good. Ooh, I knew I was wrong. I need a little more. Finishing up some of the edging, making it look a little better. And that's all you got to do for wheels, of any wheels with these paper models, or making wheels for your flying models or anything. You're using it like a little lathe. And this seems to be the best way to do it. The wood's all cross-grained, so it's nice and strong and glued in. And there are your finished little wheels. They will pass very well. Next thing I do is I chose, in this case, a gray color. And I just roughly painted everything. And you can paint into the hub, because the hub is going to be painted, or it's going to be covered with some paper that came with the model. So you don't have to be super, super careful here. It's not like painting a plastic model where everything's got to be perfect or you got to mask things off. It's kind of liberating. And you get this all colored. You use any color you want. I'm just using something that's a dark gray that I think would look kind of like rubber. And now these are the hubs. That's the inner hub that has that piece. Now I sanded the back side to make it thinner, because when you put this thing together, I find that thinner pieces will actually go together. You can't see the seam as well. And because this is a little cone, essentially, you can see that I'm using my pencil and my fat hand to roll it and make it into a pre-cone. And then I add a little bit of glue along the seam. You don't have to be absolutely precise. And then you sort of squeeze that together, spread it out with my finger, drop the piece. And then you end up sort of touching it together and making it match up. And then you just set it aside, let it dry, and let the glue do the work. This tacky glue is nice because it dries pretty dang fast. And it can be edge glued because it doesn't have any kind of structural component to it. Now I'm checking both sides. And if you look here, you notice the edging is a little bit ripped out. It's not clean. That's crummy. So that's going to be the inside. That side is actually nicer and clean. That's going to be my outside. And on this model, on this airplane, the outside, which is kind of counterintuitive, is flat. So I'm putting the flat disc on the side that's going to be outside. Later on, you'll see when it's finished, I actually enlarge those a little bit because to me the tire looks too thick once I'm all done. But this just serves for demonstration. I put a piece of wire in there so it was lined up, and I just glue it down. The back side cone that's going to be on the inside, I made sure I colored the edges, in this case with black, just to hopefully reinforce the tire. Put some edge gluing on there. Doesn't have to be super neat. And then you just stick it down in the center. And it's just a matter of making sure it's even and pushing down a little bit, but not too much because you don't want to squash your nice cone you just made. All that's going to happen is the axle's going to go through there. I push down with a little bit with my little bamboo skewer to get the edges, make sure they're touching and the glue is there. And you let that dry for a few minutes and you've got a really nice little hub. And again, to me, it's counterintuitive. This airplane, usually the conical part is on the outside, but not on the Avro. And I'm not sure why, but those, I guess, are where the spokes were situated. Now here it is, just test fitting. These two wheels go on, and all they're going to do is fit on and glue in place when it's time. And I'm just test fitting them for the first time for you here, just to see how they're going to look. This is kind of exciting because it's really neat to see the thing on its own wheels. You've been thinking about it all this time, and that's the last major component, except for little tiny details. So there it is. Nothing's glued on, but you can see how it's going to sit in its own. The skid doesn't touch the ground, the back end of the skid. Tail skid is good. And you can see overall, you can still see where the shock cords are and all the rigging. And the front of the skid, either side, the wheels look pretty good. Although, like I said, to me, my hub is a little bit small in diameter. So I ended up making a copy of these and making a piece a little bit bigger. And now you'll see that in the end. I just think it looks cleaner. Looks like the tire is a little bit thinner. But anyway, there she is, ready for the last final steps.